It's a local version. I'm sure you've used Riverside before. Hayley Arceneaux, welcome to the Astroben podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. I'm very excited to chat to you. I've been a fan since you were announced on the Inspiration4 mission. It was the Super Bowl, wasn't it, in 2020 when the competition for Inspiration4 got announced. Did you have any idea at that point that you would be involved?
Actually, at that point, I was involved, but I was a secret. I got the call to go to space last year on January 5th of 2021. And I was very shocked because one of my crew members who saw the Super Bowl commercial and then kind of joined the lottery, if you will, to get that seat to space. For me, I didn't even know there was a space mission. I didn't apply for anything. I got a phone call one day out of the blue from St. Jude, where I was treated as a kid, and now where I work, and they said they wanted to talk to me about a unique opportunity, and then they asked me to go to space, and so I was very shocked by this. I went into medicine. I never thought space would be in my future, and so of course I said yes because it's just such an incredible opportunity, and I love the idea of going to space. But yeah, and so by the time the Super Bowl commercial came around, I was a secret. And historically, I'm not a great secret keeper, and this was the biggest news of my life. But then my announcement was just a few weeks later that I was involved as the medical officer.
So you had to watch the Super Bowl. Were you watching the Super Bowl with friends or family, and you had to pretend to some of them that it was like, oh, this sounds cool, like pretend you know nothing about it?
Well, I had gotten the go ahead to tell a few people, and normally I wouldn't watch the Super Bowl, but I had a couple girls over, and that's how I told them. I told them I had some really big news to share, and everyone thought I was going to be on a dating show. That's what everyone's go-to was, and then the Super Bowl commercial came on, and one of my friends goes, "Oh, what, you going to space?" And I said, "Yeah, actually." And that's how I was able to tell some friends.
That is absolutely insane. What did they say when you told them? Did they think you were joking or winding them up?
One um, believed me right away, but she was shocked. The other was just like, okay, that's funny. And then we just kept going. And she's like, wait, are you actually going to space? And it was just so unbelievable. So few people have gotten to go to space. And historically, they've been professional government astronauts. And so the fact that Inspiration 4 opened up this orbital mission to regular people was a game changer.
So I'd like to talk about sort of your life up to that point because you mentioned you were being treated by St Jude's or you had been treated by St Jude's. So how did you feel sort of emotionally? Because obviously you've been on sort of such a journey, as a child, and it must have seemed like the whole world was against you at times. So in that moment, was it? I mean, I guess you couldn't really believe it. It was something sort of so extraordinary. Um, can you describe how you felt in the moment, and perhaps tell me a little bit about your life up until that point? Because I imagine it was extremely tough, and the book which we'll come on to will, I'm sure will, sort of tell all. But yeah, perhaps tell me a little bit more about your sort of journey up until that point, and your experience at St Jude's.
So my journey began when I was 10 years old. And until then, I had been just a normal, healthy kid. And I was very active. I had actually just gotten my black belt in Taekwondo. And I was having pain in my leg. And the doctor thought it was just from overuse from the Taekwondo. But the pain started getting worse, and I started to limp. And then my mom took a really good look at my leg and saw that I had this new tumor above my left knee. So we went to the pediatrician the next day, and she took an x-ray, and she told us just flat out, this is bone cancer. And at age 10, everyone I had known with cancer had died. And so I thought that cancer diagnosis was a death sentence. And it was terrifying. But we found this hospital called St. Jude in Memphis, Tennessee. And a few days later, I was on my way to St. Jude. And from the moment we walked in the doors, we started feeling hope, and I started feeling like I was going to be okay. And I spent a year at St. Jude. I underwent some really intense chemotherapy, and I also had surgery to save my leg, where they removed the part of my bone affected by the tumor and replaced it with an internal prosthesis. But that year at St. Jude really made me who I am, and the experience with cancer just gave me so much love and zest for life. And I think that love for life is ultimately why I said yes to go into space. There were many factors in that yes decision, but part of it is, there were times I didn't know if I would have more days, and so just wanting to make the most of every day I'm here on Earth, and embrace life. And that's now what I try to share with my patients. So I grew up, I studied medicine, I became a PA, and I started working at St. Jude. I work with the kids in the hospital on the inpatient side, and I absolutely love my job. The kids are amazing. The families are just so brave and insightful, and incredible to work with. And so another big factor in why I said yes to going to space was what this would show my kids fighting cancer, because I'm the first pediatric cancer survivor to have gone to space. But I tell them I will not be the last.
That's so fantastic. Um, I can't imagine kind of, having, other people, other kids especially having gone through cancer. They sort of look to you and, you know, being the first astronaut, with a cancer survivor and with a prosthetic body part, it must feel, quite, quite a lot of pressure that there's thousands, probably millions of people that sort of look up to you and now believe they can do the same. Here at the IAC today, Astro Access have just announced new ambassadors and flight crew for another zero G flight.
Oh,
I
that's
think
great.
12 new flyers. So there's definitely more attention on diversity and
Yeah.
inclusion and disabled access for space, which
Mm-hmm.
is down to you primarily. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Um,
Well, that's kind of you to say.
and
It's very exciting, just the like you said, like the diversity going into space. But one thing that was great about this mission was before Inspiration4, I could have never been a NASA astronaut, because of this prosthetic body part in my leg. And NASA astronauts historically have been physically perfect, and so I was really looking forward to just showing the world what people with prosthetics could do. And there was kind of a weight on my shoulders that I felt at times, but I felt it in a beautiful way. Like, how lucky am I to get to represent?
it's empowering. And how was the experience of Inspiration 4, which I do want to talk more about because we're on the Astroben podcast and we try and
Mhm.
talk about space as much as possible. But how has the experience of Inspiration 4 affected your thoughts around healthcare? Because I'm originally from the UK, and in the UK, we're lucky enough to have a free health service, the NHS, the National Health Service. And although we've got a lot wrong in the UK, healthcare seems to be one of the things that we've got right. Um, and I think that healthcare is a basic human right that we should all have access to, everyone in the world. What's your thoughts around that? Sort of speaking as an American, having experienced, perhaps the sort of the worst experience you can go through in regards to healthcare.
I am so fortunate to have been treated by an incredible institution that really is leading the way that the world treats cancer. And I have just incredible support, incredible healthcare. And I fundamentally believe that healthcare is a human right. I'm thinking, did you read my book? Because that is an exact sentence I have in there. Healthcare is a basic human right no matter where in the world you live. And I've always had a big passion for global medicine. St. Jude actually has a really incredible global program, because while the survival rate for childhood cancer in the US is 80%, um, and low and middle income countries, it's 20%. And so St. Jude is part of a global initiative to help raise that survival rate worldwide to affect every child with cancer around the world, because every child deserves the type of care that I got at St. Jude. And but seeing the Earth from space, and it really feels like you're just seeing the whole planet as one instead of divided. But that was one thought that I had when I was in orbit, was just healthcare disparities and how fortunate I was, but how important it is for healthcare for everyone to get equal treatment.
Yeah, and it's that sort of overview effect, which we've talked about in the
Mhm.
podcast before, and that cosmic perspective, looking down at the Earth and realizing that there are no borders and that we are a delicate oasis, and we're all as one. Um, I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast has seen the documentary, but there's a wonderful moment in that where you're kind of, I don't know what you're doing, you're sort of untying something and you kind of see Earth out the corner of your eye, and there's that sort of wonderment moment, which I think is really powerful. What did you feel like in that moment when you looked down at the Earth for the first time? Did the hairs on the back of your neck tingle? Were you slightly scared, realizing how high you were? What was your sort of physical and mental reaction to that moment?
So this occurred on day two. The first day we got to orbit, we did not open the hatch to get into our cupola. The first day I did see the Earth from space, but from the Dragon windows. It was day two that I think I really experienced the overview effect. And it was the first time that we were able to access our cupola. And from that cupola, which I wasn't expecting to see, we could see the entire 360-degree sphere of the Earth all at once. And then we could see even the blackness of space around it with the moon. And and like you said, I'm working in that moment, and I was very in operational mode, following the procedures of opening that hatch. And then I like just happened to look up and catch a little glimpse, and it was so shocking to me. I just remember feeling so shocked, but also in just such awe and wonderment of seeing our planet that I, at some point, I'm just floating there suspended, can't even move because I'm just so overwhelmed by what I see. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And really, I was just filled with this feeling of how fortunate am I to be able to experience this. And, again, with my background, I never thought I would go into space. I never in a million years thought I would become an astronaut and get to see that view. And I think that's part of the reason I just felt so much gratitude, was because I just knew how lucky I was to be there. Um, and it changed my life.
So tell me about life on Crew Dragon, because the documentary, it doesn't really, it shows the sort of snapshots of the reveal of the view and that kind of thing. But what was it like? Because you were on there for 5 days. Like, I can't imagine it was that comfortable. You're living in very close confinements with, albeit three other amazing people, but it must have been difficult at times. What was it like? And I guess they sort of prepared you for it in the training, but having looking back a year on, what was it actually like, which you probably couldn't have got from watching the documentary?
Um, Never felt claustrophobic. I never felt uncomfortable up there. And we were there for 3 days in orbit. And we had spent so much time in our Dragon simulator at SpaceX. Um, and whenever we were in microgravity in orbit, we realized how much more room we had, because we had that access to the cupola. It was so much easier to kind of hang out in cargo. And we were all doing our own thing. We had several different research initiatives that we were working on together, but oftentimes we would kind of work on it apart too. And so someone could be in the cupola while somebody could be doing research, while someone else could be stowing cargo. And so it was just so much more roomy in space. But I never got sick of my crew members. I loved getting to share that experience with them. And we just had so much fun in orbit. And one thing that really brought us together, especially, was meal times, because we would always be playing with our food, probably more than we were actually eating it. But so those are some of my favorite memories of us just coming together and enjoying life in microgravity.
Which I'll have to edit because for some reason it's going crazy. There you go. That's my non-HD camera, but that's probably better. Well, if you so probably part of the reason that you were so comfortable is because of your resilience, having gone through very awkward and uncomfortable cancer treatments. You're probably so well comfortable being uncomfortable, really, um, which is where your resilience comes from. How was sleeping on board? Could you sleep and did you dream whilst you were there? I'm intrigued because I've never asked an astronaut that before.
Like by the end of every day, I was exhausted, especially launch day. Launch day in itself, this is just very fun but exhausting. There's so many emotions that go into it, and then getting to space and seeing the Earth for the first time. But also in microgravity, while some things are easier in microgravity, some things are more difficult. And it all takes a little bit more thinking and planning. And so, really, by the end of every day, I was exhausted. I slept fantastic. I slept in a sleeping bag that was hovering over my seat, and I had a seatbelt around it so that I didn't float off. But my crew members all kind of did different things to sleep. But no, I slept better in space than when I got back to Earth a few days later. And I remember we spent 3 nights in orbit. One of those nights, I remember having a dream. I don't quite remember what it was, but I think I knew I was in space in the dream. And since then, every now and then I might have a space dream, but I had one a few weeks ago that I really felt like I was back in microgravity. In that dream, I could just feel the sensation again. And when I woke up, I just remember thinking that's the closest I've been to feeling microgravity since I was in space.
That's so cool. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Scott Kelly actually, in his book, and he said about how he could see because he was in space for such a long time that he could see radiation when there was sort of a solar flare or something. He could see radiation with his eyes closed, which
Mm-hmm.
to me is pretty scary. But talking about your responsibilities on the mission, because obviously, the whole mission was basically based around you. You were the inspiration place. So what did you have to do other than sort of PR? PR duties is a weird term for it, but what did you do day to day apart from doing interviews and taking pictures and all that sort of stuff? Because I imagine they kept you busy. Certainly wasn't a holiday.
Oh yes, we really took it seriously, and we felt a lot of responsibility as we were this first all-civilian mission to orbit, and we really wanted to contribute to science, and so we all participated in several different research initiatives. The main focus of many of them was just better understanding of the human body and microgravity, especially regular people for short duration space missions. As the medical officer on the mission, I also led the daily private medical conferences with our flight surgeon in mission control at SpaceX, and then I tended to some sick crew members when they were ill, and saved the mission. And then so yeah, the research took a bunch of time, and then we did have some time also to look out the window. And I remember just when I would sit in the cupola, just trying to remember what it looked like, but also remember how it made me feel.
Has how has spaceflight changed your view of the Earth? This we're obviously, we live in such a crazy world with, if you watch the news, there seems to be terrible things going on all the time, and space can make us optimistic about the future. Who doesn't get excited, thinking about being a multi-planetary species? Um, how do you think we can sort of inspire the next generation and spread the word in space? Because you're sort of a key part of that. I think are you still involved with the Polaris missions?
Yes, so many of them are very close friends of mine. So yes, Inspiration4, we're all supporting them. We're actually all together this past weekend supporting their jet training. Um, but I think a big part of it is talking about this and just showing, especially young people, that this is possible. That going to space is possible. It's something that I never thought would be possible for me, but now someone has done it. And I think a lot of kids will relate to all of our stories, how we were all just regular people that got this opportunity. Um, but I definitely feel a big responsibility in sharing my experience with others because of I know how few people have gotten that perspective, and it is something that I feel like should be shared.
That's fantastic. Well, I can imagine you're definitely a calming influence on anyone preparing for a mission, commercial astronauts especially, sort of to reassure them that, you've gone for 5 days and it was okay, you're still here. What was it like coming back? You landed at sea, what was it
Mhm.
like, re-entering the atmosphere? It was like the craziest roller coaster you've ever been on? Did you
Oh,
have did you have kind of like thoughts of, oh god, we're all gonna die? Because it just is so extraordinary, the whole experience.
so like um, the reentry was the scariest part of the mission for me. People always ask, "Were you scared for launch?" No, I was not. I was not scared in orbit. It was coming back. I just I was most nervous for. And I actually talk about this in my book. So we're strapped in about 2 hours before we re-enter, and I say to my crew members at one point, "Why don't we list all the ways we could die?" I don't. Looking back, it was very morbid, and but in the moment, I thought it would help, like in some ways, to like mentally prepare. And so we started listing some ways, and then I'm like, "Oh, that's a lot of ways." And so by the time we started actually re-entering, it I was nervous, and also reentry is more difficult physically because we were in orbit for 3 days in microgravity the entire time. When we started experiencing any amount of gravity again, I remember very specifically 0.3 G's, so just a third of Earth gravity. And I said, "Oh my gosh, this is so intense. How are we going to get to 4.5?" Because with those 3 days without gravity, any amount of gravity just felt like multiple people were lying on top of me. And
Mm.
and reentry is also more dynamic than launch, and so we had two sets of parachutes deploy, and those kind of like lifted the capsule and shook the capsule. But we were very, very happy to hear that the parachutes had deployed because after the second set, we knew we were safe. And then landing in the water, we couldn't see out of the windows because the atmosphere had fogged the windows. And so Jared's reading from a G meter. And but there was no doubt when we hit the water, it was a huge boom. And then we kind of rocked back and forth in the water a little bit before the recovery boat came to grab us. But yeah, we were very, very happy to know whenever we splashed down, we just knew that our mission was a success.
That's incredible. So you've got a book out, as you mentioned, and that's part of the reason I want to talk to you. I actually haven't read the book yet, but I can't wait to read it, and I will put in the show notes, and I'll tell everyone after this how to get their hands on a copy. But what motivated you to write it? Is this something you sort of knew you wanted to do before the mission even? And how did and also how did you do it? Did you have a ghostwriter? Did you have a sit down for an hour a day because you're doing so many things? How do you find the time to put pen to paper and deliver that in a year?
So I did a lot of the writing when it was still fresh. And I was inspired to write the book really from other people. I was getting a lot of people reaching out on social media telling me that my story had inspired them. Either people going through a tough time with their health or people that just they felt like they could say yes to opportunities that came their way because I said yes to going on Inspiration4. And this really touched me, all their messages. And so I wanted to share my story in a more permanent way and in a more complete way with writing a book. And so pretty quickly after I got back from space, I wrote Wild Ride. And I did work with a collaborator, but I said I wanted these to be my words, and so I wanted to write it. And so I would just write for we had a crazy deadline of 6 weeks. So for those 6 weeks, I just spent so much time on my couch writing, and then it was all pieced together, and then with the edits took about 2 months of back and forth. But I'm very proud of Wild Ride. I'm proud of how hard I worked on it, and also like how honest I am in it. And I think from people who've read it, that's the biggest word that they always give me as feedback is it's so honest. But part of that is I really wanted to show in a very truthful way this experience of a regular person training and becoming an astronaut.
Well, you have been on a wild ride, and it's such a unique story, and I'm sure so many people are going to get so much value from it. Apologies if this is in the book, it may be, but what surprised you most about yourself after your trip to space? Now you've had a bit of time to reflect, because you know that you're strong and resilient and all that from everything that happened before at St. Jude's. But was there anything that you learned about yourself that you could perhaps speak to?
I think I always knew I was tough because even before my cancer diagnosis, I was a tough kid. Going through cancer, I had some really difficult things that I had to endure and also maintain hope through. And but going through this experience of training and going to space, I realized I'm tougher and braver than I thought I was. And training itself was not always easy, and especially when we climbed a mountain together as part of our crew bonding, and we climbed Mount Rainier, that was not easy. And it's something that I realized after we did it that if I knew how long that climb was, I would not have done it because it was a 9.5 hour climb up the mountain. Um, but then also after realizing that, I realized I would have been putting a limit on myself that did not need to be there because I was capable of more than I realized.
Hmm. What else do you want to accomplish in your life? You've done so much at such a young
Yeah.
age. Is there anything else that you could perhaps mention that you really want to do? Apart from inspiring as many people as possible and continuing working with St. Jude and
hmm
SpaceX or other space companies. But is there anything else back here on Earth that you'd love to perhaps give some
Yeah.
time to?
So I love Earth and I want to continue exploring our beautiful planet. I have been very into international travel for several years um, and I just have so many more places on my list that I want to visit. And then being in space and getting to see our beautiful planet from perspective, it also showed me a lot of places I want to go. And so I just want to continue exploring our planet and I think I want to get my private pilot's license too. Most people
Are
become
you?
a pilot before they become an astronaut. I think I'm going to do things backwards, but I was around so many talented pilots through the Inspiration4 journey. On my crew, Jared Isaacman and Cyan Proctor, they both have their pilot's license. And then so many pilots also worked as part of the larger Inspiration4 team. And then all the times that we got to spend in fighter jets through training made me really excited about aviation. And then I'm just going to continue sharing my story with other people. It's going to be through books and this memoir just came out for adults, Wild Ride, but I'm going to come out with a middle grade version, so aimed at ages 8 through 12. That one will come out next year, and then I'll do a children's picture book as well.
That's so awesome. What about an audiobook? Have you done an audiobook? Because I like to listen to, I,
Yes.
I love listening to audiobooks. I think they're brilliant. I'd love to hear it in your voice.
Yeah, I actually narrated it, and that one's out now too. Wild Ride,
Uh,
the audio.
Amazing. I'll put those in the show notes as well. Um, well, look, thank you so much for coming on. Your story is all the inspiration that we need, and showing that resilience and courage are so important, and you can achieve your wildest dreams. Um, so yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll speak to you at some point in the future.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Ben. This was fun.